So are all cameras going?
Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Delmar, together with my co-host Mark Rowan, Just Statewide News Service and jbiztechvalley.com.
Well, Rabbi, you always say in the show that you're 29 and holding. Well, you can't say that this time because we have the state director, New York State Director of AARP with us.
Oh.
So anyone over 50 can be a member of AARP. So Beth Finkel, welcome to the Jewish View.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now you have a lot of issues on the plate. There's a lot of things going on with AARP, but something just passed in Congress recently that would help with Medicare, that AARP took a stance on, and they wanted more inclusion, but they didn't really oppose the measure. Do you know about this?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
So yes, the Congress just passed, both houses, very quickly, with vast majorities, a law that will extend what we've been calling for many years the doc fix, which is to figure out how to keep pace with the cost of medical care for doctors, because every year they were having to go back in and refix the formula to be able to pay the doctors' fees on Medicare. So now they've finally put in a permanent fix to it, so we're very pleased about that. There were some things in it that we were hoping that would be enriched a little bit more.
Such as?
All
right. I didn't get that either, so
right.
okay.
No, I could start going into detail, but basically, I'm sorry, because I could have it in front of me.
That's okay.
We can send it to you later if you prefer.
I just read about it, and it went totally out of my head, and I didn't remember it. But I know that it was about the reimbursements for the doctors.
It is, and it's also about the cost actually to Medicare recipients. So yes, the government's going to pay part toward it. Medicare will pay part toward it, and then there will be an increase in some levels of people. Depending on your income, there'll be a change in the formula in terms of what you pay out.
And I think what the big part of this is that it was bipartisan.
Yes.
And there were very few no votes on.
Very few on either side.
They always talk about that the senior vote, which of course that's who you represent, has a tremendously strong position, or always, in Congress and probably around the country, because there's so many seniors, which, that the seniors, they say they're going to, of course, like I say, it may not include me, but in any case, the seniors are increasing in number, or maybe percentages of the population.
So AARP has 38 million members in the country, and in New York State alone we have almost 2.6 million members, and they vote, and I think that's what you were getting at, Rabbi. They're much more likely to vote than other cohorts, and as a matter of fact, we know that over 50% of the voters in the last gubernatorial election were 50 and older.
In 2010, there were 58% of AARP voters.
Really is a lot.
Yeah.
But you say you have to be 50 years old. I know when people hit 50, well, I got a letter from AARP. What do you think I am, over the hill already? But why is that number? I always would think that 65, that's when you get Social Security. That's when you kind of become, when I was a kid, you're a senior citizen at 65.
Well, we don't really, to us, we're not saying you're 50 and you're a senior. What we're saying is that now's the time to start making sure that you're taking care of certain things in your life. Where is your financial security? How prepared are you to retire? Who better than AARP to help you get on the road to a very secure retirement? And the same thing with health. How do you take care of your health? Medicare, how do we take care of Medicare? Shouldn't somebody 50 be advocating for strengthening Medicare? Right.
Thinking ahead. So that's a good reason, because I know a good few people come to me, I'm only 50, and they're thinking I'm retiring already. What kind of business is this?
Well,
but you got to think ahead. You're right.
You have to think ahead.
A lot of people I know that unfortunately, they don't plan for their retirement, and then they're 65, they're 70, and they get a little decrepit, and Now what do? You know,
Well,
no one,
it's-
you don't think about it, or what do I do for my retirement? Now you're thinking about it. You know?
Well, it's interesting you should say that because we spend a lot of our time both trying to advocate for people individually and then also advocate for them at the policy level. So what you said is really important because what we know is that in New York, the average Social Security income, if you're on Social Security, the average person's getting $15,500. We all know what $15,500
Not even gonna pay rent on
would
here.
Right, would pay for. That's number one. And then we also know that less than 50% of people who have IRAs actually have $25,000 in it. So
Really, that's
$25,000
really
is
not
what
gonna
they,
get you too far with
that's
all that.
exactly right. So when you look at that combination, we really need to be talking to people even younger.
So,
Yeah, I see it's an important
how
point.
long before you turn 50?
Thank you. That was a perfect question.
There you
And if
go.
none of my Forest Hills High School alumni are watching, then
Okay.
nobody will know.
Well, that brings me to another point of, where did you grow up? How did you get here, to the position that you're in? What's your background?
Well, I'll make you laugh on that one. So I grew up in Forest Hills,
Yeah.
and I actually started off in marketing, and that was my original career. And I actually was a sales manager for national lingerie companies
Oh,
in
really?
my first career before I re-careered. And then I had my children, and I stayed home with my children for a number of years.
But where'd you go to college?
I went to college at American University, and then I got my master's degree at Yeshiva University at Wurzweiler.
Really?
I have a social work degree, but it's in community organizing. And I really got into that because as I was at home with my children, I started to volunteer. I really cared about public parks. I got very involved with homeless advocacy, and I decided that if I was going to get more involved with that, I should professionalize myself. So I went to yeshiva and I got my master's, and through that ended up in placements for aging services, and just really felt that I loved it. I got very passionate about it.
You were so young at the time.
Oh, I was so young.
And that you really, you thought maybe, oh, this is, I'm talking about aging now, and let's say you were in your 20s or 30s, that must have seemed so far down the road.
Well, I thought demographics were on my side. Don't forget, I had the marketing background to begin
Right,
with, so
right.
I knew, hopefully people were living longer, and
That's right.
baby boomers were going
No,
to
that's
be
actually
this
one of-
big block that jumped in there.
So
That
did
is-
you ever
yeah.
think of you wanting to run for office?
Yes and no.
Uh-huh.
Mark's
Yes,
our
and no.
Let me hear
political
this.
writer. That's how we
I
know.
wanna hear
That's so
the story.
interesting. I thought about it because, if you really want to make a difference, if
Yeah.
you really want to change policy, you have to get into it.
Right.
On the other hand, modern politics with the scrutiny and the lack of a personal life that you end up having, and I had children and family, and that was my first priority. So that's
So
why.
what would you have run for if you were going to run for office?
I don't know. I just.
On the state or federal level, or would it be
Oh, now or then?
then?
Oh, then I thought about city council, but then
Okay.
I did not do it.
All right. Well,
But, you talk about the AARP, and again, demographics, that the senior citizens are really ballooning in percent number and percentage. But that's what they always talk about. Oh, the Social Security system's going to go bust. You say 10 years, 20 years, I don't remember the facts, but that's what they
Actually
say.
not.
It's going to destroy the economy because, like I said, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and we have to take care of the seniors, and we won't have the money. That's usually what I
Well,
hear around that.
Respectfully disagree with you.
Well, it's not me. I'm reading the
Social
the articles,
Security is
that's all.
actually very secure. However, it's believed that some adjustments must be made just to keep it as secure as it is. And there are a number of things that Congress will probably be considering, and I think we'll probably be hearing about it from the presidential candidates that are going to be running. And that's a big part of what AARP does, which is to educate voters and educate them to ask the right questions of the people who are running for office. And I'm sure you're going to see, as the campaign starts to heat up, AARP really coming out with a lot of important, pointed questions to make sure that anyone who is going to be running for president President of the United States has Social Security uppermost in their minds.
And I was at a forum several months back that said the economic impact of people 50 plus is phenomenal in New York State. It's absolutely,
Because they have so many assets, what does it mean?
there's so many.
Yes.
Well, explain maybe.
So AARP recently did a study which was entitled The Longevity Economy. We did it with Oxford Economics, and we were able to actually quantify the impact of people 50 plus on local economies or New York State economy. And the numbers are really amazing. So
Why? It's because they have more assets. Usually, again, I'm not an expert. You tell me. I just read an article and I'm throwing it out to you. That they say, oh, the young people, they always like the TV advertisements. Oh, those 20, 30-year-old people, they need a new computer, a new car. And once you're a senior, I don't need so much.
Well, again, we're talking 50 plus,
right.
right? So we're talking about people who hopefully are in their biggest earning years, number one. Number two, there's a good chance they're moving into being empty nesters, and hopefully they've launched their children successfully. And so that now they have discretionary income to spend on their own. And so we know that people who are in that age group tend to spend their money. The average middle-class person does not take their money and stick it offshore, right? You get your money, you get paid, and then you go off and you spend it. So
Yeah.
it's a huge impact.
A lot of assets.
It's so billions and billions of dollars impact to the New York State economy. It actually makes up 46% of the GMP is spent in New York State by the 50 plus.
Well, that's interesting.
Yep, and 53% of all jobs in New York State are supported by money that's spent by the 50 plus. So it's really extraordinary when you look at the impact. So one of the things that we analyzed in our report was boomer flight in our last research, and we found that over 60% of boomers were saying in New York State that when they retire, they were seriously considering moving out of state. And so what does that
Like
mean?
to Florida, a good Jewish
Well,
person goes to Florida.
Well, they
The
could
Holy
be
Land,
going.
did you say?
Could be going to many places.
Yeah, obviously,
Carolinas is actually a very popular spot now, but Pennsylvania too. And
Arizona,
so, right, and so people, that what happens, they take their New York State pensions, they take their Social Security, any of their other assets, and then they spend it in another state. But more importantly, and I think this is important to all of us, is they take their human capital with them. And who are the volunteers at our
That's
JCCs, YMCAs, et cetera? It's generally people who have just retired, and they have their energy, and they want to help their community. And so I think it behooves all of us to figure out a way to make sure that they want to stay in New York State.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask you, you've been calling on state legislators to make prescription drugs more affordable for the senior citizens. And I remember the EPIC program and when that first started.
That's right.
But what has happened to that, and why is
Well,
this
actually,
a renewed call for affordable prescription drugs when we had the EPIC program?
Well, actually, we worked on getting the EPIC program, the qualifying benefit for your income raised. It was doubled.
Right.
So that's wonderful. So yes, because drugs are still a lot of money for people, and they're not going down in price, and we know that.
Right.
So
But
yes.
between Medicaid, Medicare, EPIC, I mean, doesn't all that cover the medicines for the seniors?
Again, it's 50. Well,
Yeah.
we're lowering the qualifying, and
Okay.
yeah.
So EPIC is elderly prescription insurance coverage?
Yes,
Okay.
but it wraps around the Part D benefits, so it's a little bit more.
And it still exists?
Oh,
EPIC?
absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Just
Oh,
want
yeah.
to clarify that
it's
it's
very
still
important. It's a very important part of the safety
there. I
net.
remember this one woman goes back 30 years, Rose Kryzak.
I knew Rose.
You knew
Kryzak.
Rose? Okay.
Yes.
She was like 90-something years
Yeah,
old.
she was still fighting.
And she
Oh
was
my
still
God.
fighting, and she was on the second floor when Mario Cuomo was governor. and she got up on the trooper's desk on the second
Yeah,
floor, and
right.
she starts rallying all the
She
other
was a
seniors.
great advocate.
And so the governor came out of his office, got up on the desk with
Really?
her, and started rallying.
Oh my God, that's great.
And it was a wonderful picture.
wild
and,
story.
You know, yeah, it was. He always, the governor at that time always played into the antics and the people who were protesting, because he felt it was freedom of speech. He wanted to show he was listening. He wanted to, and he was successful that way.
I'd
So-
love to loop back to
Yeah,
people
sure.
being able to afford to retire in New
Okay.
York and stay in New York. One of the things that we've been looking at, along with how much people have in retirement savings, is what vehicles, what tools do people have actually to save their money. So, the having the old-fashioned defined benefit pension has really gone the way of the dinosaurs, unfortunately. And many companies offer 401ks, but in fact, 54% of New Yorkers who work for for-profit companies do not have any access to any pension plans at work. So they don't have a
Wow.
defined pension plan, but they also don't have a 401k. And thank you. Okay, well, perfect.
Here I
We're going
am.
to talk to you a little
That's
bit
it.
more. So we really feel like this is a very important part of people's future security that needs to
So how do
be
you
addressed.
treat your employees, at
Well,
AARP?
AARP is thankfully the example,
Is
I
it?
think, to the country.
Because I'll
Yes.
tell you, CSEA and PEF, they don't allow their workers to unionize, which is ironic. So when you talk about AARP and the and healthcare, and retirement benefits, I
Pensions,
got to
right.
ask you, how do
But
you
again, it goes
stack
the
up?
other way also, like we were talking about. I mean, we're in upstate, but in New York City, and I have kids down there, even though the basic rent, like you say, by the time you're done with Social Security, there's no room, there's no money for food.
Right.
So, I mean, it's one thing savings, to build that up, and maybe that needs an education on people, like you say, start early.
Right.
But then, I mean, what
But
can
there
you do
also has
against
to
the
be a
expenses?
mechanism to be able to save with. So we're looking at different opportunities to figure out other ways to have people be able to save. So if you don't have a 401k, could companies offer through state government some kind of a work and save, we're calling a work and save vehicle, that small companies could offer, that New York State could present to them. And so what we know is that many small companies don't offer 401ks because it's expensive to administer them. And so if there was something in place that the state government offered that small companies could be a part of, then they could offer that to their employees. So we're very anxious to pursue something like that. It could be a regular kind of an IRA kind of mechanism, or it could be like a 529 plan that you could just pay into. So that's something that we're advocating for in a very strong way.
And something else you're advocating for is a review of low-income assistance programs with an eye toward reducing the incidence of utility shutoffs due to unpaid bills.
Yes, and that goes
you
back
want
to
an-
what you were saying,
And you want an
Rabbi.
independent utility consumer advocate.
Very much so.
Okay, could you explain
Very
that a
much
little
so,
bit?
Yes.
Because, yeah.
So 40 states in the United States have this independent utility office that is a kind of an advocate for consumers. 40 other states in the country have it. New York State does not have it. And you might scratch your head on that because New York pays the highest utility rates in the continental United States. So where are we looking out for our consumers?
And I
And
thought there
right
was-
now we're hearing all over the state, and particularly on Long Island, we're hearing about threats that rates are going to go up again.
And I thought there was a position at the Public Service Commission that was the utility advocate, because Lisa Rosenblum, I
It's-
remember, used to head it up. But
So there's not a full-blown independent office that does not report to any other government body. And there's not any independent office that would have standing in court that could actually take a case
see.
to court to represent consumers. And another thing you might scratch your head about is that not only do we not have representation, but when the utility companies have to go in and present information about why they need a rate hike, they hire experts.
Sure they do.
To the tune last year of $13 million.
Really?
And guess who pays that $13 million?
The consumers.
It gets billed directly to consumers. So the consumers in New York are now paying for the experts for the utility companies.
hike the rates.
But the consumers do not have representation at the table. So we find this troubling, and we just can't understand why 40 other states in the country can have this, and New Yorkers
So
can't have it.
Where's the bill now? Is it even going through the legislature? Is there a bill?
There is a bill. The Assembly has a bill. The Senate has a bill. We had hoped that we'd see something in the budget. We did not, and so we have the rest of this season
Yeah.
to
Isn't this a policy
raise-
decision, though? More than a budget issue?
You
Shouldn't
have
this
to pay
be?
for the person.
That's
Well,
that's
you have
true.
to pay for it, but you set the policy first, and then the next budget you fund it. You know, you don't have.
Or
to-
you can fund it in the budget, and then it moves right into policy. So it literally
Well,
could work either way.
yeah.
We are now on Plan B.
Okay, all right. And this, utility shutoffs due to unpaid bills for the seniors. Can you explain that a little bit, or?
Well, we believe that more protections have to be in place. We have to be able to seek out who those people are, how that's happening, how we can get mechanisms in place so that people don't get shut off, that in advance something is done so that they get the help that they need. In terms of there are benefits out there, there's LIHEAP, there are other benefits, and we need to figure out how to connect people.
And I wanted to ask you about family caregivers, because too often they're left unprepared to provide proper care before taking their loved ones home from the hospital.
That's right.
I mean, I had that situation with my father. Ensuring that caregivers are offered instruction and any post-discharge task that their older parents, spouses, or loved ones will need at home. So you're saying there should be someone with the elderly patient, to listen and to get and to retain the information, because it's a lot of information these doctors and nurses pour into you when you leave.
Exactly. So we are advocating for something called the CARE Act, and the CARE Act has 3 basic components to it. And by the way, there are 4 million family caregivers in New York State.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
It is a lot.
And Alzheimer's, I was at an Alzheimer's conference, and that's a big part of caregivers now that
absolutely.
they're finding,
That's right.
what do I do?
That's right. So what we're proposing in this legislation is that when you get admitted to a hospital, anyone gets admitted to a hospital, you have the option to designate a caregiver. You don't have to, but if you would like to, you can. So you get a caregiver designated, and then before you are discharged, that caregiver has to be informed that you're going to be discharged. I mean, this is all just common sense.
But it's
Right?
a shame that it has to be legislated.
Exactly,
You
but
know,
it does.
it does,
It
yeah.
does. And then before your discharge or at discharge, the caregiver has to be informed exactly what care. So let's say you're going to need wound care, and they're assuming that your wife is going to perform that wound care. And your wife might actually be very willing to do that. But she's going to say, I don't know how. No one's ever trained me. And I don't want my husband to get an infection because I'm not going to be able to do that wound care effectively.
Properly,
So what we're saying is give that caregiver the training. It might be something very simple. It might be putting eye drops in your eyes, but it has to be done properly. It might be transferring, which is one of my favorite ones, because if you don't know how to move someone from a wheelchair into a car, what can happen? They can fall, and before you know it, they're back in the hospital like this.
And the healthy person could throw it back out.
Well,
And then you're really
and then you've
between a
got 2
rock and a
people in the
hard place.
hospital.
Right,
That's exactly right.
And I also wanted to ask you, you did receive a major increase in funding in this state budget?
Yes, we were
Okay,
very,
so
very
could you-
pleased.
yeah.
Yes.
Because I know they asked for dues, so maybe just to give the whole picture of how you're funding.
Oh, not AARP didn't get funding. I think you're trying to see that
Senior programs.
family caregivers
Yes.
got much more
Right.
funding
AARP
in the
is-
state
And that's why I was
government.
segueing from
That's
family
right.
caregivers
That's
to this.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
but-
when you said you. So
Well-
I thought
Well,
AARP.
I spend a great deal of my time and our staff's time advocating
That's
for
right.
improvements for quality of life for people 50 plus, so
Right.
and their families. So yes, so
That's
you're right.
why I
take
mentioned
it
it.
personally. I do. So yes, we've over 70 $66.5 million went into the state budget, both for this year and for next year.
Right.
And that money is going, part of it is actually going to go for respite care, and I think 16 million of it is actually going for Alzheimer's services to be able to provide respite care. But there's other money that's going to be going into other home and community-based care. And
have
we're
you-
very excited about that.
And I'm sure the governor's excited about that, but have you given him his AARP card?
Yeah, he's 50.
Does he
I
get-
don't think we're allowed to give gifts to politicians.
Oh, okay. There you go. It's above that limit, huh?
Just respite meaning, what was they're going to offer, like the in-home services?
Well,
Is what it
respite
means?
services is if God forbid your mother was living with you and she had Alzheimer's, and you and your wife had not had a vacation in goodness knows when, and your daughter's getting married wherever, and you want to go, but what are you going to do about your mother? So respite services might be there would be a
That's what it
respite
is, yeah.
actual site that you could drop
It's
your
not
mother off
permanent
at.
for people.
No,
No.
no, no. So it's just to give you respite. Whoever
All right, I
and it could
understand.
be a few hours a day, but it could be for a weekend. It could be whatever.
It's kind of like how Friendship Circle works, where they have the kids
Give time out.
within
Time
a,
out
yeah,
for
so
the
the parents could have a respite for an
Yeah, all
hour
right.
or
Yes.
It's
two.
good that you defined it. I didn't know exactly what it was
Yes.
talking
So,
about.
Now, do you have trouble with the Public Service Commission dealing with seniors? Is there sort of like a love-hate relationship of any sort, or is it because it seems like you seem to fight with the utility companies, and maybe the PSC is not.
I wouldn't characterize it as fighting with them. I
Yeah.
think that we're trying to raise the awareness
Awareness.
of the plight of consumers
Making it a teachable
in New
moment?
York State.
Okay.
New Yorkers are unbelievably burdened by high utility costs,
Okay.
and so we feel it's really important that we have representation at the table, but also that that entity have standing in court. It's really essential.
All right. Did we? I don't think we mentioned this, but under the work and save proposal, could you go into what the work and save proposal is?
That was what I was talking about,
Yeah.
another savings vehicle.
Right.
So I think I covered
Covered
this like it
that,
would be
yeah.
a 401k like.
And
what
it's
does
like
the
a
state
fi-
need to
yeah.
be doing? That was one more question I had on the work and
So
save.
this-
Why do you need the state? They would just supervise it, or
So
they would
very
invest?
much like a 529, right? I don't know if you have 529s
College.
or right college. So if you want to put away money tax-free for your children or your grandchildren so that they have money to go to college, there's a mechanism that the state has created. It's called the 529 plan, and you can put in that money
So
tax-free.
you're talking about, instead of college for your kids, retirement for yourself.
Exactly. It could be that kind of a mechanism. Illinois just passed a bill recently that provided a work and save model for Illinois, and so that's a little bit different. I don't have all the exact details of it, but it's a different type of mechanism. The important point here is that over 50% of people who work for for-profits in New York State just don't have any savings vehicles attached to work. And we know that if money comes out of your paycheck, that you've okayed that money should come out and be put away in savings, we know that people are much more likely to save for their retirement if they have that opportunity at the workplace. And so that's what
Really?
we're advocating
Because
for.
I think there are a lot of people who are just living paycheck to paycheck,
They
and
are.
they can't afford to put that money aside.
And that's another problem, and there are another set of solutions that we need to look
Okay.
at for those people. Absolutely.
And, I always say that if you live a long, happy life, and I saw this with my grandmother, she had dementia the last 10 years of her life, but from 83 to, when she was age 83 to 93, but, you leave the world the way you come in. You can't control yourself, you have, you can't eat, you can't speak, you can't think, you can't hear, you have all these issues, you lose your teeth, you got to be fed Gerber baby food or beech nut, whatever's kosher. And you have the, certain, you crawl up in a fetal position towards the end of life. I mean, there's I saw a full circle,
I agree with you. I think I just
Yeah.
shared with you earlier, my mother passed away in September, and you see and she, knock on wood, led a very, very long and wonderful life, but you see that all of the things that you acquire in life just slowly starts getting shed away as you age. everything starts, just as it came in, it starts to go out. And I don't necessarily mean the finances, but, all those things that are so important to you in terms of material possessions, It's fascinating as you see, as people age, that reprioritizing and then that kind of shedding of the non-essentials until you're right. You leave this world as you came into it. It's
Beth, we're out of time, but
fascinating.
That's
we
a
want
good way to
give
leave this show, yes.
Yeah, I know. Well, on a good note over here, you're a good advocate for the seniors, and of course, I'll be there in another 20, 30 years. But in any case, bottom line is that wish you a lot of success in
Thank you.
doing a big chesed, you call it in Hebrew, a kindness, for the people, like you say at the end, that they're very vulnerable. They don't have the means, they don't have the strength, and they need a lot of help, and you're helping them get that
And they
help.
deserve to have the kavod. Right?
Okay, well, much success. Be well.
Thank you very much.